Good morning and thank you for joining us online. I'm Sharon Min-Chow inside the KHOU 11 studios. Today, Vice President Kamala Harris is in Houston, and right now we are just moments away from the presumptive Democratic nominee addressing the American Federation of Teachers, its national convention in downtown Houston. We have team coverage of her visit today from inside the GRB and outside, where crowds are gathering and folks just starting to enter the convention hall. We'll start inside that convention center with Victor Jacobo, where Harris is expected to arrive at any moment. Victor.
Yeah, Sharon, that's absolutely right. A lot of energy in this convention hall as the programming began a little under an hour ago. Many people still filing in. Again, this national convention with a lot of events happening around the GRB. Some of the participants were in a breakfast, and so now they are coming in and arriving and filling in many of the seats in this convention hall. Some of the programming really tying to what we expect to hear once the Vice President does speak, really a pro-labor union message. And that is something that Vice President Harris and Democrats really want to link themselves to, which could be vital and important in the November general election, especially in those key battleground states. Remember, this is a national convention. Many of these folks are going to go back to their home states, to their home communities. And if Kamala Harris is able to energize them and share a message that they can win in November, they're going to take that to their home states and do things like knock on doors, make phone calls, and reach out to their networks in order to boost that turnout, which is critical for the Democrats. Vice President Harris, she visited a battleground state in Wisconsin earlier this week, then Indianapolis, now here in Texas, really trying to get out there and make her message clear. And that's one of the key things about this shift that has happened and the passing of the torch from President Biden to Vice President Kamala Harris. Experts saying that she's a better spokesperson for the Biden-Harris administration's record. And that's what she'll try to do here at the AFT Convention in just a few minutes. She'll be arriving, making that keynote address. Already some mentions from other speakers of Kamala Harris have really fired up the crowd. Whenever her name is brought up, applause breaks out. Again, those signs, you'll see them once that speech happens. They'll be holding up those signs that say Kamala for President. So really trying to connect to a very important base here with a pro-labor union and teacher movement here. Remember, teachers have been at the really center of the culture wars between conservatives and liberals in classrooms, and that is something she may want to really get across, is that she is going to make the case that Democrats are going to be the preferred choice for unions, for teachers. So really an important message that she's going to be sharing here in just a few minutes at the George R. Brown Convention Center. Sherman, I'll send it back to you.
All right. Yeah, you make an interesting point, Victor, that the classrooms have sort of been this focal point of the culture wars. So this could be a pivotal moment. A lot of interesting issues could be raised. And a quick note, do I understand correctly that this is, if you will, a closed forum only for the members of the convention, right? Not open to the public this morning?
Yeah, Sherman, that's right. That's only for the members here. Again, this has been going on for about a week here at the George R. Brown Convention Center, and obviously a big energy shift once it was announced that Vice President Kamala Harris was going to come. A short while ago, they showed a video that was produced where members were voicing their support and excitement for Kamala Harris. You combine that with the signs, kind of shows you how very quick turnaround in order to really get in place, really setting the scene to show support for the Vice President now that she has arrived here. So lots of energy, and certainly they're going to be showing her support here in a few minutes.
All right, we will check back in with you shortly, but let's step outside now where crowds are also gathering. Our Tracy Bragg is there, presuming there's a lot of energy outdoors as well.
Yeah, Sherman, you mentioned energy. We heard Victor mention excitement. That's what we saw here. We saw countless teachers in a long line, many of them waiting over an hour and a half to get their chance to see the Vice President speak. And actually, you can see the red door behind me. Many of those teachers just beyond that red door, again, waiting for their chance to take a seat. And I have to say, energy and excitement. Many of those teachers mentioning that they feel that this is a moment that is a historic moment. They feel that this is something that will be remembered for years to come. And I have to mention, we spoke to teachers from all over the country. We spoke to teachers with many different backgrounds. backgrounds, spoke to teachers from many different ethnicities. That is important to mention because we wanted to hear what everyone had to say. And everyone we spoke to, all about excitement and about their feeling that the vice president has a chance to possibly galvanize the nation. They say that this is something that many of them thought they would never see, but they are proud to see. An African-American woman, an Asian woman, being able to make a run for the top spot in the White House. So many of the teachers we spoke to today, again, from all over the country, saying that they don't mind waiting an hour and a half. Many of them changed their plans, saying to make sure they came back here, to make sure they would be here to see the VP speak. And actually, one woman we spoke to, she actually said she drove all the way back to New Orleans after hearing that the VP would be here. She drove back to New Orleans because she is an AKA as well. She got all her AKA gear. She's wearing it today because she wanted to represent. So again, we can't say it enough. Excitement, energy, all abuzz in this building, Sherman.
All right, Trace and Bragg inside the GRB, outside the doors of the convention hall, about 3,500 attendees. This is the last day of the 4-day American Federation of Teachers conference. So, as you say, some folks might have left and coming back to be able to see the vice president speak. Now, outside the GRB is our Jason Miles. Obviously, we've seen supporters inside, but Jason, some protesters outside.
Yeah, very small but vocal crowd, Sherman. You mentioned 3,500 people inside the GRB, exponentially larger crowd than the folks out here, but these folks are dedicated to their cause, gathered around that famous Jean Dubuffet sculpture here in Discovery Green. It's kind of the protest area set up by police, and there are many officers in the area as well. In fact, just an hour or so ago, a couple of protesters tried to make their way into the convention center, and they were quickly turned away by police officers. These folks are concerned about the ongoing crisis in the Middle East, particularly between Israel and Palestine. These are pro-Palestinian protesters or demonstrators. They've been chanting. Some of those chants targeted to Vice President Kamala Harris. They've mentioned her by name. They believe that if she wins election later this year, that their cause should be top of mind when it comes to her administration. Obviously, the rain out here, it's been raining since we've been out here this morning, may have put a damper on turnout, but certainly as we have covered these types of events over the years, even small crowds can be quite vocal and still get some attention, in particular here outside the GRB today. Sherman.
Thanks, Jason. Of course, a little echo of the big protest last night in D.C. from pro-Palestinian supporters, quieter here in Houston. This morning, the Kamala Harris campaign releasing this brand new commercial as she starts her run for the 2024 presidential election. Let's take a look.
Freedom to be safe from gun violence. The freedom to make decisions about your own body. We choose a future where no child lives in poverty, where we can all afford health care, where no one is above the law. We believe in the promise of America, and we're ready to fight for it. Because when we fight...
This video focusing on the economy, gun violence, health care, and, of course, taking aim at her opponent, former President Donald Trump. A big driving force in Harris's campaign is major support from historically black colleges and universities across the country. Katira Winfrey has more from Texas Southern University on how Harris is energizing young voters there.
Texas Southern University is welcoming a new batch of freshmen this week. Volunteering is senior Michaela Wallace. She's the president of the TSU debate team.
I think it's very inspirational for black women who want to get into politics or who want to be public servants to see that, like, you can be the top of the top.
When news dropped that President Biden would drop out and endorse Harris, the debaters got to work.
We are very, politically informed, and we have to know about those things when it comes to debate. So we were already doing, research.
It's an exciting time for women and HBCUs. TSU grad Kamaya Marshall was just named a senior advisor to the Harris for President campaign. In a statement to me, he said the upcoming election is of utmost importance and the progress made by the Biden-Harris administration must be protected. I am proud to be part of this team, fighting for a better tomorrow and future ahead.
I woke up the other day and I thought, oh my God, my dear friend is going to be president of the United States.
Melanie Miles is an HBCU grad from Howard University. She's an attorney and longtime friend and sorority sister to the vice president.
We have an opportunity to change the course of history here, and it's so important.
Miles says so many groups have galvanized around the idea of our first woman president, and they're ready to see what comes next.
I think that it's like super revolutionary that we've got.
Katira Winfrey reporting there. And now for some perspective on all of this. Joining us is KHOU 11 political expert and Rice University political science professor Bob Stein. Good morning, Bob. How are you doing?
Good. Good morning. How are you?
Good, good. All right. First question, why do you think the Harris team chose Houston to be among one of our first big campaign stops?
Well, I think Houston, a lot of people obviously don't think that Texas is going to turn blue or that the Harris candidacy will win the state. But in many respects, the constituencies that are here, African Americans, Hispanics, people who are suffering from high inflation, the border issue, and most importantly, where she's speaking right now, education. I think these are issues that she feels resonate with her base. And even though they may not necessarily bring Texas into the Democratic column, these are constituencies that are all over the country, and most importantly, in key battleground states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and of course, Pennsylvania. So she really gets to talk to her base. It's an opportunity, particularly in education. As we all know, HISD has been taken over by the state. The governor and lieutenant governor are in a fierce battle for vouchers. These are issues that resonate throughout the country. And I think teachers also are a large population of voters, but most importantly, a large population of campaign workers and contributors. So, and I think it's also a soft landing. What we don't really know is how well Vice President Harris can deliver the message that clearly President Biden has faltered at. And this is a place where I think she'll get a positive reception and has a chance to play up some of the issues, education, school choice, of course, the issue of abortion. I don't expect her to talk a whole lot about the border and immigration. But again, this is a receptive audience. And I think after hearing President Biden speak last night, there will be a lot of contrast. We're hoping, if you're a Democrat, that she will look like she is the new improvement to a person who can articulate not just what President Biden is doing and wants to do, but what the Democratic Party has for the rest of the country.
Yeah, and you make an interesting point, both about this federation representing some 1.8 million members nationwide, so very broad base, even though the event is here in Houston. And then you did talk about it, right? Last night, President Biden giving a speech about why he pulled out of the election, talking about passing that torch to a new generation. So given those questions about his mental fitness, I mean, if you were a betting man, do you think that torch will be passed to Kamala Harris while Biden is still in office? And if she ascends the presidency before November, does that help or hurt her campaign efforts?
We're in a world of, we talk about 24-hour news cycle. Things keep on changing. My bet is that there is a high expectation, and it's going to be hard to realize. I think there will be a honeymoon period of the next couple of days. But Harris will be vetted not just by the Republicans and Donald Trump, who clearly have gone after her very early, but by Democrats, many of whom feel at this point Harris was sort of forced on them. There wasn't really an open debate, an open primary, an open delegate discussion. And if Harris falters, I think there'll be that sense of what are we into for now? I think the simple answer to your question is it couldn't have been any worse than they had with President Biden at the top of the ticket. So at this point, I think there's a sense of we can move in a positive direction. But I think everyone is going to be scrutinizing every word, every gesture that Vice President Harris makes, not only today, but for the next couple of days. I'll also note that they have, however quickly they've raised money, the Trump campaign and the Republicans have moved very quickly to run ads to define who Kamala Harris really is. And that, of course, is no different than Joe Biden, just a different face, a different gender, and possibly a little younger. But I think it's a real test. And if I had to be optimistic, I'd say the best shot at this point is that she continue to find audiences like she has here today with teachers before she perfects what I think it's got to be the clear stump speech that draws a distinction between what she represents and what Biden represented when he left. it'll be tough. It's a challenge.
Okay. If you will, sort of warming up along the campaign trail. So do you think there's been talk by the Republicans about a potential lawsuit because of, the transition of the candidates and all of that? Do you expect to see some legal action as well?
I think you've already heard a lot of rhetoric. House Speaker Johnson said there'll be challenges. I think the Democrats have moved very quickly. Yesterday, the executive committee of the DNC moved up the what we call the virtual roll call. There are states like Ohio that I believe have a deadline of August 16th, which is I think 2 days before the Democrats meet in Chicago. I think they'll get around that. If I had to be so bold, I think that's not the best strategy for the Republicans. If you start going after ballot access, if you start going off after the transfer of monies, you're not talking about the candidate, Ms. Harris. You're not talking about the issues. You're not talking about the incumbent president, who still remains president and gave what I thought was an okay speech, but didn't reassure anyone that he is any more capable of handling the duties of the presidency than he was when he handled the debate with President Trump. So I think the Republicans will shift from that. The real question and the real candidate is Trump. Last night in North Carolina, he sort of couldn't resist, as he said, being mean-spirited. He said to the audience, everyone tells me I've got to be nice and let J.D. Vance do the hard work. And then he went on to refer to Vice President Harris as, I think, a lunatic and imbecile. I'm not certain the public is going to be persuaded, at least in these battleground states, among these sort of what we call swing voters. I think the Trump campaign was on a really strong trajectory to win this election, and I think it's still their election to lose, but it's clear that their candidate, Donald Trump, is not necessarily cooperating, at least in terms of trying to stay on that message of, being more positive and unifying, and let other surrogates, including his vice president, do the real hard hit job on Ms. Harris. Meanwhile, I think Ms. Harris's ads are talking about, sort of a more positive view of government, a more positive view of where the country is right now. And the clear one, I think, for her is, can she do what Biden couldn't do? Explain what this administration is trying to do on the economy, on immigration, on wars in the Middle East, wars in Ukraine, and particularly on the larger issue for many, many Republican, undecided Democratic voters as well, the economy.
The inflation question, the economy question is certainly paramount. And you do make an interesting observation. One might say that former President Trump, you heard, days after the assassination attempt at the RNC, that speech there in somewhat marked contrast to his remarks, just yesterday, addressing and referring to the vice president. When we talk about Mr. Biden, how does Kamala Harris respond to critics who charge that she and others may have hid Mr. Biden's mental fitness issues? How does she respond to that question?
I think the way the best, again, I'm not being asked for my advice, but it's a fair question. The answer is not to talk about it. To simply say, President Biden is the president of the United States. He continues to do the job and focus on that. I am running for president, and I am still the vice president. And I personally think the best strategy for Vice President Harris as a Democratic nominee for the presidency is not to have Biden around. Biden constantly reminds voters of just the questions you've raised and whether or not he is mentally and physically competent to be the commander in chief. Every time he's on stage, he, I think, in many ways, disappoints Democrats and gives Republicans what I call an opening. The best thing that Biden can do is do what he claims he's good at doing, talking to world leaders and solving what is maybe the number 2 problem, maybe number 3 problem for many voters, the wars in in Ukraine, in Gaza, and maybe the pending war between Taiwan and China. He needs to be, maybe, how can I put this, heard but not seen. And what we really need is Ms. Harris to replace Biden, not only as a presidential candidate, but as the leader of the Democratic Party. The more Biden's out there, the more these questions come up. And I think she forces herself to have to at least answer those questions, and there is no answer. I think Biden made it very clear yesterday what he was going to be doing. He's handing it off. I think the less we see and hear of Biden and the more we hear of Harris, assuming she can now manage that new mantle and handle the deficiencies that President Biden was accused of and driven from the ballot, the better off the Democratic Party will be.
You think Barack Obama has not yet endorsed her?
Yeah, that's a curious one, and everybody's sort of speculating about it. There's no history, there's no secret that there was, how can I say, not a lot of good feelings between Obama and Biden, particularly going back, of course, to the 2016 election where Hillary Clinton was Obama's choice. I don't know what that's about. My point is that he and Bernie Sanders seem to be holding out for something. Sanders wants policy, progressive policies, particularly for working class Americans, which makes sense. But I'm not quite certain what Obama's holding out for. And it may very well be that he wants to see whether Harris can prove herself on the campaign trail. Can she make a significant improvement as a spokesperson and leader of the Democratic Party? It may be that Obama holds out hope for some other candidate. Although it would be spectacular and hard to imagine, but if for some reason Harris falters, will the Democratic Party actually consider at the convention another candidate? I just don't think that's possible at this point. Just practically, they've got to meet some deadlines. So I'm not certain what Obama's holding out for. And it may be that he, like Bernie Sanders, is talking about policies and positions.
Okay. Well, and you brought it up, deadline. There's 103 days left to the November 5th election. Obviously, Kamala Harris has a lot of momentum right now, just becoming the official nominees like 3 days ago, the $100 million pledged. A week ago, everybody was talking about the assassination attempt against Trump. This week, the news cycles are dominated by Harris on the campaign trail. Do you think she can sustain this kind of momentum for the next 100+ days?
I don't know. I think what you have in Ms. Harris is an unknown factor. She was not a spectacular presidential candidate back in 2020. It's not that she isn't articulate, informed, intelligent. She's a prosecutor. These are the strengths, but they're not proven. They're not seen yet. She's taking over an entirely different presidential campaign from the Biden camp and bringing it into her own. She's had a history of, how can I say, difficulties working with staff. But again, I think it's just not known. But I think what's really the bigger challenge is not whether she can step up and perform well, but do it quickly. Do it before the Trump and Republican Party define her in such a way that she's on the defensive. She's cut a new ad, which we've just seen. But I think today's speech is the beginning of what I think is going to be a long but very quick, how can I say, debut on stage. And first impressions are clearly going to be critical here. So I'm going to be watching for whether or not she can do one or two things. One, can she just be articulate? I mean, that was something Biden couldn't do. He couldn't deliver a coherent sentence about what he has or wants to do. Number two, can she draw sharp, important contrasts between herself and President Trump in ways that are resonant, salient to the key voters in those battleground states? And that probably revolves around the economy, and maybe the economy again, and most importantly, of course, immigration, and possibly dealing with issues like foreign policy. But she's really got to be able to move rather quickly, leave very positive impressions, and not be compared negatively, if that's possible, to Biden. If what she does is sort of garble her sentences, fails to hit her major points, doesn't resonate with what I will call these swing voters, these undecided voters, in but a handful of maybe at the most a half a dozen states, we'll know about that within a matter of, if not days, maybe even hours.
Oh, okay. You mentioned all the things that she really needs to do. In terms of issues, what's her best attack against Donald Trump?
I think that's hard. Right now, where she's really getting her push, of course, is that she replaced Biden. The issues for many, many voters was that Biden simply wasn't physically and mentally capable of being the commander in chief. Well, she's addressed that. She's past that. Now she's got to demonstrate that she is mentally and physically competent to be the commander in chief. Second, I think she's got to be able to say to voters who have been persuaded that maybe the Trump years were better, that the Trump years will bring, the new Trump administration will bring back better days, that they won't. And that's going to be hard. I'm not certain voters are ready to hear about issues like, if we raise tariffs on China, will that really have a positive or depreciating effect on inflation? If we try to deport 20 million non-documented aliens, is that going to have an effect on the economy? Can that even be done? And then talk about, I think is going to be a big issue for her, because she meets with the Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel this afternoon at 4:30. I think she's going to have to address her position on at least the war in Gaza and Israel. And that's a tough one. I think she's counting on Biden and others being able to negotiate and persuade Netanyahu to go for a ceasefire that has been on the table now for several days, if not weeks. But again, those are the kinds of things that we don't know. But she's got to be able to talk to issues that are salient with these voters who are not yet convinced, not only that Biden wasn't the choice, but that Trump shouldn't be the next president of the United States.
Yeah, and interesting, because she obviously was not there yesterday when Netanyahu addressed Congress, a lot of protests by the pro-Palestinian groups outside, but she meets with him this afternoon. How?
Well, and
yes. No, I mean, how difficult is that to manage? An apparent snub to now a one-on-one.
She was a little bit more critical of Netanyahu than was Biden. And she raised this issue in a context of the civil rights movements, that human life was being lost in Gaza that could be changed. I think one of the concerns is that the Republicans see a real opportunity here to drive a wedge between the Democrats and Israel, and particularly voters in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, large Arab American population in Michigan, in the Livonia area. So this one's going to be a tight walk for Vice President Harris. But I think that the bigger issues probably than the foreign policy one and the war in Gaza are the economy. She's got to be able to explain what not only the Biden administration has done and its successes. Unemployment is down. The rate of inflation is down, but inflation's still a problem. And she's got to be able to point to things, like the Anti-Recession, Anti-Inflation Act, and how they dramatically impacted places like Wisconsin or Pennsylvania. And that's going to be a tough one, because some voters may not necessarily be tuned in to these policy debates. When Trump doesn't talk about them other than to simply say, Biden and Harris have been a disaster, what she's got to come back is be able to talk about policies in ways that touch people, that resonate with them in a very personal way that they can identify with. That's a very hard message. And I'm not certain I could even give any advice on how to phrase that, how to offer ads and a visual presentation. But that's what needs to be done.
Yeah. And ever more a challenge in this day and age of social media, where, a TikTok video is X seconds long, and these are real issues that take a little bit more time than that to discuss. Bob Stein, thank you very much for your insights and taking moments to share those with us this morning. We'll keep you there in our back pocket, as it were, but we're going to go back to Victor Jacoba, who is inside the George R. Brown Convention Center, and we are waiting for the Vice President to make her appearance. Any word on when she may be taking the stage?
Yeah, well, there's still a lot of anticipation. Just a few seconds ago, a chance of Kamala Harris broke out here with people holding up signs, so trying to pick up that energy as that waiting and anticipation builds up. But certainly a lot of excitement for folks to see her. And Harris's reception here has been, when arriving to Houston, has been mixed. She arrived yesterday in Air Force Two, was greeted by Houston Mayor John Whitmire, and went to the Office of Emergency Management to receive a briefing on Hurricane Beryl recovery. And today, another Democrat also celebrating and touting Harris's visit. Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo proclaiming today as Vice President Kamala Harris Day in the county. throwing her support behind the vice president, but also kind of a mixed bag as the Harris County GOP releasing a statement for the vice president's visit. I'll read part of it. It says that Kamala Harris, along with Joe Biden, has promoted policies that have hurt Texans and had an administration that has been based upon lies to the American public. So that's kind of part of this constant wave of attacks that we've seen from the GOP as they try to grapple now with a new candidate on the Democratic side, highlighting things like the Biden-Harris record on the border, pointing out that Harris, while she's here in Texas, has not gone down there, but here she's going to be among friends with this labor union. And so right now there's a cheers as they're going, expecting an announcement here for a possible introduction for the vice president. A pastor earlier speaking, invoking Kamala Harris's unofficial slogan. And so right now the head of the AFT going to speak, and so we're going to go to that introduction right now, expecting for the vice president to come up.
So are you excited? Are you ready to elect the next president of the United States? So, 4 years ago, the AFT made a great choice. We supported Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as the leaders best prepared to lead our country out of crisis and to a brighter future. They have created the strongest economic recovery in our lifetimes. They've restored integrity to the White House. This is the most pro-labor, pro-worker, pro-family, pro-public education administration in our history. Now, we have an opportunity to make history again. Kamala Harris has led the fight for our freedoms, to make our own decisions about our own bodies, to live safe from gun violence, and the freedom to join a union. Kamala Harris fights for a future where every person has the opportunity not just to get by, but to get ahead. So, the Vice President is right behind us. I told her earlier that her entry into the race has electrified this race and has electrified this hall. So, my friends, we all know there's a lot of teachers in this hall, so we all know a lot about assignments. So, my friends, my siblings, do you understand our assignment? Are we going to go full throttle through November 5th? Are we going to shatter every record for voter turnout? And are we going to elect Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States? So, let me introduce one of our own members, Brittany Shoop, you knew that, who's going to introduce the Vice President.
Hello, AFT family. My name is Brittany Schaup. I'm a proud member of the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers, Local 400. Now, I've only had 3 pinch me, I don't believe this is real moments in my life. One, when I was hired as a special education teacher in the Pittsburgh Public Schools, which has been my dream since I was a 3rd grader in the Pittsburgh Public Schools. 2, when my sweet, loving husband proposed on Christmas morning. And 3, these last 36 hours, when I found out I was going to introduce Vice President Harris. As a special education teacher, I had heard about the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Unfortunately, what I had heard was that during the last administration, most people who applied for it didn't get it. The Biden-Harris administration fixed PSLF and made the process easy. So I applied and later had my student loans forgiven. This is a huge weight off my shoulders, and now I help my fellow teachers get the debt forgiveness they deserve. Vice President Harris fights for us. And as president, she will fight for a better life for all Americans. And now it is my honor to introduce the first woman to be elected Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris.
Goodness, it's so good to be with everybody. Please have a seat. Please have a seat. If you have a seat, please have a seat. It is good to be in the House of Labor. Thank you. My goodness. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Oh, thank you all. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Can we hear it for Brittany, please? Oh, thank you all. It's so wonderful to be back with everyone here. Thank you. That means so much more than I can say. Randy, thank you for your friendship, your long-standing friendship. As we all know, Randy is a force, and she has been an incredible friend and an advisor to the President and me. And I want to thank you on behalf of the President and me and our country for all that you are. And I want to begin by saying a few words about our President, Joe Biden. You know, right? Yeah. So last night, our president addressed the nation, and he showed once again what true leadership looks like. He really did. His words were poignant. You know, I'll speak in a moment about the importance of reminding people of history, teaching America's true history. He thinks and talks about his work and our country, understanding what it means in terms of what we do now and how that will impact the future. He thinks about our history in the context of the importance of the work we do now. In the past 3.5 years and over his entire career, Joe has led with grace and strength and bold vision and deep compassion. And as he said, that's right. And as he said, in the next 6 months, he will continue to fight for the American people, and I know we are all deeply, deeply grateful for his continued service to our nation. Thank you. Thank you. And to the members of AFT, I thank you for your service to our nation. From the public service workers and higher education faculty to the school bus drivers and the custodians to the school nurses and our teachers, you all do God's work educating our children, the whole ecosystem of who are AFT members. It is you who have taken on the most noble of work, which is to concern yourself with the well-being of the children of America, and I thank you for that. I thank you for that. And I thank you also for your support over the years and for being the first union to endorse me this week. Thank you. I thank you. I thank you. And as you may know, I am a proud product of public education. Many of you know that my first grade teacher, Mrs. Frances Wilson, God rest her soul, taught me and educated me and encouraged me and inspired me. And years later, when I walked across the stage to receive my law school diploma, Mrs. Frances Wilson was in the audience. Yeah. Yeah. And that's who you are. I know who you are. I know who you are. This work is personal, and it is professional, and it is so critically important. And so it is because of Mrs. Wilson and so many teachers like her that I stand before you as Vice President of the United States of America. And that I am running to become President of the United States of America. And what I know firsthand is that our teachers and all those who are here, all the members of AFT, I know that by nature, you are visionaries. You are focused on the future. The work you do is about a focus on the future. You see the potential in every child. You foster it, you encourage it, and in so doing, you shape the future of our nation. Which is why I say we need you so desperately right now. Today, we face a choice between two very different visions for our nation. One focused on the future, and the other focused on the past. And we are fighting for the future. And in our vision of the future, we see a place where every person has the opportunity not just to get by, but to get ahead. A future where no child has to grow up in poverty, where every senior can retire with dignity, and where every worker has the freedom to join a union. We see a future with affordable health care, affordable child care, and paid leave, not for some, but for all. We see a future where every student has the support and the resources they need to thrive, and a future where no teacher has to struggle with the burden of student loan debt. So as an example, our administration has forgiven student loan debt for nearly 5 million Americans, and twice as much for our public servants, including our teachers. Teachers like Tanya Cabeza, who I met recently in Philadelphia. Tanya was first in her family to go to college, and she had been, like many, paying off her student loans for 20 years. And she told me, she was like, look, I at many times wondered, would I have to leave this profession I love to just be able to pay my bills? But I did it, but I didn't leave because I love what I do and I understand the importance. But making decisions then about what she could afford in terms of her daily obligations and dealing with these loans. And after 20 years, she still owed $40,000 in student loans. And we forgave it all. When she learned, she told me, she said, when she learned that her loans had been forgiven, she said, well, me and my children knew our lives had changed, and we were just dancing. So there we go. But we are clear-eyed as we work to build a brighter future and to move our nation forward. There are those who are really trying to take us backward. And you, I'm sure, have seen their agenda. Project 2025. Randy, can you believe they put that thing in writing? 900 pages in writing. So Project 2025 is a plan to return America to a dark past. Donald Trump and his extreme allies want to take our nation back to failed trickle-down economic policies, back to union busting, back to tax breaks for billionaires. Donald Trump and his allies want to cut Medicare and Social Security, to stop student loan forgiveness for teachers and other public servants. And I say to AFT, they even want to eliminate the Department of Education and end Head Start, which of course would take away preschool from hundreds of thousands of our children. He intends to give tax breaks to billionaires and big corporations and make working families foot the bill. And he intends to end the Affordable Care Act. Now think about that, to take us back to a time when insurance companies had the power to deny people with pre-existing conditions. Remember what that was like? Children with asthma, women who survived breast cancer, grandparents with diabetes. You know, America has tried these failed economic policies before, but we are not going back. We are not going back. No, we will move forward. And one of the best ways to keep our nation moving forward is to give workers a voice, to protect the freedom to organize, to defend the freedom to collectively bargain, to end union busting. As head of the White House Labor Task Force, I have led our work to eliminate barriers to organizing in both public and private sectors, including for teachers. But there is more that we must do. President Joe Biden and I promised to sign the PRO Act into law, and I promise you I will keep that promise. Because when workers join together and demand what is fair, everyone is better off. Understand, and I say this everywhere I go, understand, you may not be a union member, but you should thank unions, and I'm looking to the cameras in the back of the room, not them, but the people who might be watching. You may not be a union member, but thank unions for the 5-day work week. For the 8-hour workday. Thank unions for sick leave and paid family leave and vacation time. Because the fact is, unions helped build America's middle class. And when unions are strong, America is strong. So AFT, ours is a fight for the future, and ours is a fight for freedom. In this moment across our nation, we witness a full-on attack on hard-won, hard-fought freedoms. While you teach students about democracy and representative government, extremists attack the sacred freedom to vote. While you try to create safe and welcoming places where our children can learn, extremists attack our freedom to live safe from gun violence. They have the nerve to tell teachers to strap on a gun in the classroom, while they refuse to pass common sense gun safety laws. And while you teach students about our nation's past, these extremists attack the freedom to learn and acknowledge our nation's true and full history, including book bans. Book bans in this year of our Lord 2024. And on these last two issues, just think about it. So we want to ban assault weapons, and they want to ban books. Can you imagine? All the while, these extremists also attack the freedom to love who you love openly and with pride. They pass so-called don't say gay laws. Now I have to tell you, so many of you may know, in 2004, on Valentine's Day weekend, I was one of the first elected officials in the country to perform same-sex marriages. So here's the thing. It pains me so to think 20 years later that there are some young teachers in their 20s who are afraid to put up a photograph of themselves and their partner for fear they could lose their job. And what is their job? The most noble of work, teaching other people's children. And God knows we don't pay you enough as it is. In this moment, we are in a fight for our most fundamental freedoms. And to this room of leaders, I say, bring it on. Bring it on. Bring it on. Here's the thing. We believe in our country. We believe in its promise of freedom. And the American people believe in the promise of freedom. So we are in the fight. We who believe in the freedom to vote will pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. We who believe in the freedom to live safe from gun violence will pass an assault weapons ban. We who believe that every American should be free from bigotry and hate will fight to protect our teachers and our students from discrimination and make sure every student can learn America's history. And we who believe in reproductive freedom will restore the freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government telling her what to do. So AFT, that's right, bring it on. So ultimately, in this moment, I know we all know, we each in our country face a question. That question being, what kind of country do we want to live in? A country of freedom, compassion, and rule of law, or a country of chaos, fear, and hate? The beauty of our democracy is that we each have the power to answer that question when we vote. And when we vote, we make our voices heard. So today I ask you, AFT, are you ready to make your voices heard? Do we believe in freedom? Do we believe in opportunity? Do we believe in the promise of America? And are we ready to fight for it? And when we fight, we win. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
Vice President Kamala Harris just finishing her remarks addressing the National Convention of the American Federation of Teachers. This happening inside the GRB. She spoke for about 20 minutes to a very receptive crowd. These are her people, as it were, the Democratic Party supporters there. Also in the room now, Devon Ramming in the audience. He heard that speech in person. And as you can see, folks continuing to cheer her as she makes her way off the stage. So Devon, all right, so Devon is taking some notes there. He gathers some information in the room. We're going to move on over to Bob Stein, KHOU 11 News political expert and Rice University political science professor. Bob Stein, are you there, sir? All right, we're working to get Bob Stein on as well. So this is the crowd, a standing ovation in part for the vice president there. We are hearing that there are some 3,500 people attending. That is the number of people who attended this 4-day national conference. And these were the people invited to hear the address in person. Closed address, not open to the public. Oh, the camera there now wrapping up. The pull camera's closing down. And if you heard the vice president speak, she stuck mostly to sort of the bread and butter issues, if you will, for the Democratic Party. She talked about loan forgiveness, canceling student loans, obviously an important issue for this particular crowd, the American Federation of Teachers. She also spoke about supporting same-sex marriages and gay rights. She talked about reproductive freedom, talking about abortion, a big issue, of course, with Texas having among the most restrictive abortion laws in the country. So she hit on a lot of these hot button key issues that are very important to Democratic supporters. And now the crowds are making their way outside of that room there, outside of that convention hall. Our Trayson Bragg is there as he sees the folks kind of wending their way outside. What are you hearing from the crowd, Trayson?
Well, Sherman, yeah, you mentioned a lot of those teachers now making their way out of the room right now. You can see them pouring out right behind me. I'll tell you this, we were standing out here not far from where the VP was, not far from where the teachers were inside watching, and we could hear the screams. I know you all could hear the screams as well. You mentioned a lot of excitement around what the VP had to say around her race. We're excited to hopefully speak to some of these teachers as they exit. But again, this is something that a lot of people that we spoke to today are calling historic. They're calling her run historic. They're saying that they are excited about maybe what she can do, something that a lot of folks mentioned, galvanizing the country, galvanizing so many folks who, you know, let's be honest, she makes up a large part of our population. She's an African-American woman, she is an Asian woman, she is a woman in a very high position that is the first ever VP, first ever female VP. I mean, she's done a lot already, and a lot of the folks that we've spoke to here today say that that's what they're excited about. They're excited about who she represents. And you mentioned gay marriage, that's a topic. We've heard that before. We've heard that that's an important topic for so many folks. So again, it comes down to excitement, and we're gonna speak to some of these folks as they leave here in just a few minutes. But for now, I'll send it to you, Sherman.
All right, thanks very much, Trayson. Now we're going to get to Devon Rahming. He was in the room as the Vice President made her remarks. So Devon, talk to us a little bit about what struck you most from your vantage point of actually being in the room with the crowd there.
Well, Sherman, the crowd here practically blew the roof off this place when the vice president took the stage. And, you know, she was on the stage speaking for about 20 minutes. And from the moment she took the stage, this really turned into a campaign rally for her presidential run. She started by thanking Joe Biden for his service to our country and for portraying what true leadership looks like, something she equates to the people in this room as educators being great servicemen and women to the nation. She also rallied up the crowd, thanking the American Federation of Teachers for being the first union to endorse her run for the White House, a movement she says she pledges to fight for as Commander-in-Chief, where every worker has the freedom to join a union and protect the freedom to organize and to end union busting. And she ended by stating unions help build the American middle class, and she asked this crowd if they're ready to fight and go to work as she runs for the presidency. Of course, we're going to have much more from our coverage here this afternoon in our later newscast, but that's the latest from the GRB. For now, we'll send it back to you in the studio.
All right, Devon, thank you so much. We appreciate that. And our coverage of the Vice President's visit to Houston will continue across all of our platforms. We'll see you again on air on KHOU 11 News at noon.